Doctoring Differently podcast. I'm Dr. Naomi Lawrence-Reid, a pediatrician, your host, and creator of the Doctoring Differently digital course that teaches physicians of all specialties how to find and explore flexible, lucrative careers beyond full-time clinical medicine. For more information, visit doctoringdifferently.com. Today, I have Dr. Kalie Dove-Maguire, an emergency medicine physician and chief product officer at Evidently, a healthcare AI company that makes healthcare data clinically actionable while elevating care quality and reducing burnout for physicians. Dr. Dove-Maguire attended the University of Washington School of Medicine and completed emergency medicine residency at UCSF. She's currently based in the Bay Area. I'm so excited about this conversation and all of the guests on the podcast. You won't want to miss any of it. Subscribe to the podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And subscribe to the Doctoring Differently YouTube channel to watch all of the episodes on YouTube. And now for my conversation with Dr. Kalie Dove-Maguire. Well, with me today, I have Dr. Kalie Dove-Maguire. Welcome to the Doctoring Differently podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Could you start with describing a little bit about what you do in tech now and your interests within the field?
Yeah, certainly. So I've worn a lot of different hats. Right now, I work for a company called Evidently, and we describe ourselves a few different ways, but I like to say we kind of rescue clinicians from drowning in all of this unusual data. And so we're kind of like this EHR agnostic platform that surfaces all of the relevant information for clinicians to do their job, whereas a lot of times the EMRs that we work in don't really do that. So in that role, I'm their chief product officer. So I run a lot of the product things. I do some external facing, more like sales and marketing stuff, but mostly it's product work within that group. And we have a lot of underpinnings of machine learning and AI and all of that, sexy buzzwords right now, but we do the like kind of boring foundational stuff rather than like the really flashy stuff that people are seeing with ChatGPT and things like that. So that's kind of where I am in the tech world right now, but it's all clinically related.
Fantastic. And I know so many listeners, physician listeners, will be so interested and curious about that intersection of the keywords, the buzzwords you've mentioned,
Yeah.
GPT, AI, and that intersection with clinical and non-clinical medicine and what that even looks like. So we will get back to that. And I'm so interested and excited for our conversation. Could you tell me, I know you are an emergency medicine physician. So just going back, so I'll start in medical school. What initially drew you to emergency medicine? And then we'll talk about kind of your journey and path to where you currently are.
Yeah, I had a very windy path. So I had this amazing family doctor that delivered me, and then was my mom's doctor, delivered me. He was the old school family doc that did OB, absolutely everything. And then he was my doc growing up, and I was, impressionable, teen being like, I think I want to do this. And so he kind of took me under his wing and showed me all of the different things about being a family doc. And I thought I was going to be a family doc. Got to med school, then got really enamored with surgery, thought I was going to do surgery, actually completed the application to both surgery and emergency medicine. But EM was the last thing I ever got exposed to before I was able to put in that application. And finally I was like, oh, these are my people once I got there, and, called an audible, applied into emergency medicine, and then went into EM, and went to residency at UCSF. Loved it. Finally, again, found my people. I was like, these people talk fast like me. We care about the actual things that are going to get done. I loved it. Anyway, that's what kind of drew me to emergency medicine, was the variety, the intensity. We all have a little bit of that, I don't know, that ADD kind of nature,
yes.
Well as the variety. So that variety is what really drew me there. And, the intensity is kind of what kept me there.
Got it. No, you described it perfectly. That's what they tell us in medical school. Find your people, find the attendings, and that just fit you. The conversation flows, the energy matches yours. So that's great. Okay, so that was medical school, and then as you started to describe, you enjoyed your residency. That you didn't doesn't sound like you were necessarily looking outside of clinical or full-time clinical medicine while a resident. You enjoyed the work and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but after residency, did you see, a future? Did you maybe assume that full-time clinical medicine was going to be your path in your career?
Yeah, 100%. I thought I was gonna, so I loved residency. I loved, well, I don't, residency's hard. So I was very burned out in residency, but I loved the clinical work. I loved taking care of people. I loved, not having any barriers between me and the patient. Anybody off the street, I would be able to take care of. So that part I loved. I actually thought I was going to be a full-time clinical community doctor because in academic medicine, I liked a lot of that too. But I was like, this doesn't quite fit me super well because I really liked clinical medicine more than I did the academic medicine part of it because I liked research, but the pace kind of bothered me because it, took a long time to do the IRB and then the data and that sort of pace was, I love the intellectual curiosity of it, but the pace took so long that that was kind of frustrating to the end-to-end projects took so long. So that wasn't really, what I wanted to do. So I thought, I post-residency took a full-time clinical job, thought I was going to be a full-time clinical doc and was thrilled to do it. But then after I was out, I was working, more than my contract said. So I there was definitely a component of burnout, but I also was kind of looking around being I was a little bit unfulfilled. And the thing that I didn't put enough importance on when I was in residency was all of these kind of larger scale projects that I worked on. So I worked at the WHO. I did a big informatics project while I was in residency, but I didn't realize that's what informatics was when I was there. I did this clinical decision support. I just didn't realize that was what I was doing. And those were the things that really gave me the big level of fulfillment. And so when I went straight clinical, working 22 plus shifts a month, that was a lot. And I was missing that, upstream sort of thing. So I kept, patching people up, but I really wanted to I described it as plugging holes in a ship, but I just wanted to build a better ship.
Oh, what a great analogy. So, all right, your story sounds so similar to mine. And, enjoyed residency, really envisioned and imagined a life in full-time clinical medicine after that. Mm-hmm. What was... you were in the Bay Area, so you were at the center of the tech universe, really. So maybe you had more exposure. I'm not sure as well. Please get into that. But what was kind of the moment, if there was a final straw moment or a timing in your life soon after residency as an attending where you thought, you know what, this is the time to make a change or make a move or really start the process of exploring and custom making my own type of career?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I don't know if there was one final straw moment, but I remember the period of time when I made the decision. And so I worked for Kaiser post-residency. It was a phenomenal job, great benefits. They had an EMR that worked. The patient population was awesome because I worked at a couple different sites. So I got there was a large non-Kaiser patient population I got to take care of. But I looked around a year in being okay, so 10 years from now, I'm still going to be doing this. I'm going to be having the same job. And I just was I need something else. So I needed that, I needed more WHO work. I needed more, large scale work. And I couldn't figure out how to make it work with the current job. Because at the time they had this very restrictive contract. So you couldn't do anything external while you were working full time for them, which, yes. I understand has changed now, but at the time it was one or the other. So it was a tough decision for me. And it was probably the hardest decision I ever made was to jump off that train, because in med school we do med school, we do residency, then we're okay, fellowship. Oh, not fellowship. Okay. Best job I could get. And then I was, and they describe it like the golden handcuffs because you have this amazing pension and all these things. And I knew that I was okay, I got to jump off this train before those handcuffs get any tighter because this is, I could see it. And so that's why I decided to leave early. So I quit the full-time job. I kept working per diem because I'm still paying off my med student loans, but got to make some money.
Yeah, but, absolutely.
I was able to have more flexibility over my schedule, so then I could actually put effort into the other things. But as far as the tech world, I knew it existed, but I had no clue as to what it was really beyond Silicon Valley and watching that, HBO show, which was now it's way too close to home. But at the time it was still abstract and entertaining. So
right.
Yeah, I didn't start that exposure until quitting that, job and having enough time and mental space to be able to explore those other interests.
Thank you so much for saying that. I think that our paths are, unbeknownst to me, until this conversation, our paths are so much similar than I think I even knew, in terms of, a relatively quick exit from full-time clinical medicine. I think for me, it was almost 3 years, you around the 1 year mark, and then going per diem. We think that leaving full-time clinical medicine has to be like an all or nothing, but that per diem contract, for me at least, and it sounds for you as well, really was, it gave you a little bit of breathing room, right? It got us off of the treadmill, because the treadmill was going very, very fast in full-time clinical and academic medicine, but it gives you at least that a little bit more capacity, a little bit more wavelength to be able to consider alternative and other types of work and pursuing your own interests, while still having some clinical exposure. I don't know about you, but for me, I had a lot of side eyes and a lot of interesting looks from classmates, colleagues, mentors who told me, I don't know, I'd be curious if you got the same pushback, but at least in pediatrics, no one leaves. No one doesn't do full-time clinical medicine unless you have a good reason to, which as women usually means, you're going part-time because of your family or because of a spouse's job or that kind of thing. But so few actually, it's just like, no, I actually want to try and explore and do other things. Did you have any pushback from your colleagues or the people in your field?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of pushback. I think honestly though, there was a decent amount from my own head. I had a little bit externally, but like in my own head, I was like, what are you doing? This is a terrible idea. Like you're giving up all these things. Like, Kalie, you need health insurance. Like all of these, all of these big things that I had to kind of weigh on. And fortunately I had a very supportive, boyfriend at the time whose company policy was very generous in terms of insurance. So I was actually able to get on his insurance and I could have done Cobra too, but like all of those, and plus, my parents are very supportive too, but they're also like, you need job security, you need to have insurance, you need to have retirement, like all these things. And I was like, I know, but I'm slowly dying every time. So I need to like make a change. And yes, I got pushback. But I don't know. I powered through. And about like 3 to 6 months afterwards, I was like, dear God, that was the best decision I ever made. It was the hardest decision, but it was the best decision. And when I say I wasn't working full time, I was still like working a full-time ER schedule. It was just on my terms, which meant like all the world to me because I, suddenly wasn't overscheduled all the time. I could have the mental break to be able to, think about other things, including like sleep and eat and pee and all those things, which are also pretty critical.
Man, I don't know. You're asking for too much when you ask for those basic human rights, But
yeah, so true.
You nailed it exactly. That was my experience coming out of full-time clinical medicine as well, just per diem. I was working, at that time, I had bills, I had things I had to pay for, I had loans to pay back. And so I was working clinically, making an hourly salary, but that felt like such a step in the right direction. It was, the administration would come to me and ask, hey, are you able to work these dates or this shift? And often, yes, but even having the ability to say no and to decline a shift that was maybe a weekend or an evening or an overnight or a holiday, and some I worked, but to be able to decide for myself, getting that piece, that small modicum of autonomy and control. That I think once you taste that early in your career, like we both did, it opened up the rest, and then you're saying, okay, I'm still a doctor. I'm still practicing clinically, but I'm doing it on my terms. And anything else I pursue in this career will have to look very similar to that. It'll have to be on my terms. I'm great at what I do, but I'm going to do it when I want it and how I want to do it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And like coming out of residency, it was definitely perceived as like, the second tier citizen. And even at some of the shops where you work too, you're also like treated as a second tier, like employee, like the full-timers get all the things and then the per diems kind of get the scraps of what's left over. And depending on where you work, that might be a little different, but yeah. So for everybody, for me to be like, no, I think I'm going to take that, second tier step. And everyone's like, ooh, second tier.
Right.
Why would you do that? But man, it's a
Yes.
hidden secret. It's pretty great.
It's a hidden secret that we are now
Shouting from the
proclaiming.
rooftops. Yeah.
Shouting from the rooftops. And I will say I finished my residency in 2014, and I'm seeing more and more graduates coming out and pursuing this kind of working
Yeah.
schedule, at least at the beginning of their career, which I'm overjoyed to hear. And even if they don't, I want to be clear, like, you started the full-time clinical, I started full-time clinical, and I think that there is nothing wrong with that. I think where we run into trouble is thinking and believing, okay, now that I'm here, I can't ever leave. This is,
Yes.
we're so used to seeing these, we're pre-med to the end, we're medical school to the end, we're residency to the end, and we have to see these things all the way through. And there's no getting off the train. There's no taking another route. It's you see this thing all the way through. And of course, we are generally not equipped, given the tools to find jobs, and we're not given the permission to navigate a physician career or look for different jobs or negotiate contracts. That's just hasn't historically been a part of our experience in medical education and in training. So those when you have a taste of that freedom early on, and you see what you can create on your own, it becomes even a per diem contract. It doesn't sound like a big thing, but I think we know how big it is in the moment, and to be able to make those changes early is it changes your career. It really changes your outlook on your whole profession and your kind of the outlook. I was in my early 30s at the time. You probably were as well, and I think you kind of don't look back once you get a taste of it.
Yeah, and just having the optionality, because I don't know, for like I had a great job. Like I loved the job. Like for a lot of people it is the perfect job. But for me it wasn't, and it's just I didn't really know there was that other option until I just did it. I just kind of jumped blindly, and I was like, I don't know if there's another option out here, but I know this isn't working. So I'll always come back,
Thank you for saying that as well. I feel like you are in my mind. I promise we didn't have a pre-discussion before this, but it's that part. It's listen, you are a doctor. You will never not have a job. There will never not be emergency room work, emergency medicine work for you to do. There will never not be pediatric work for me to do. So I can go out, I can try new things, I can explore, I can keep my hand in clinical medicine on a per diem or part-time contract, but I can do other things. And if I don't like it, I can come back. But it's that feeling of we have that permanence, that no, I have to hold on to this thing with everything I have and I can never leave. But again, I'm seeing such a shift and a change and a mindset. Of course, we all have lived through a pandemic, and I think that just really has changed a lot of mindsets for the better, truly for the better in that way. So, but you answered my next question, which was going to be, what was the hardest part? And sometimes that first step is the hardest step. And then as you described, you really don't ever regret a second of it after.
Definitely. And I had one of my friends, who was another clinician, who kind of categorized it and helped me frame it in a different way. And she basically said, she was like, yeah, all of our careers have kind of phases. And, for this phase, I am going to focus on this. And for this phase, I'm going to focus on this. And so for residency and post, I worked a lot clinically, even though I didn't technically have a full-time job. But my focus was, learning how to take care of patients. That was my focus. And so now the stage in my career I'm at is actually the clinical part is taking a back seat. And that doesn't mean that it will be forever like that. But for this phase in my career, it's going to take a back seat. But yeah, I can always go back, as long as you don't literally burn the place down and spike that pager as much as you would like to. Having, be respectful when you leave. The doors are going to be open. None of these people are magically getting well. I mean, the U.S. is still abysmal in terms of health. So I think, we got a lot of job security in that aspect of it.
We absolutely do. You again said it perfectly. It's, where people are concerned about quote unquote burning bridges on their way out the door. But as you said, putting your notice, be respectful, be a
Yeah.
we always want to be that team player, finish out your shifts or the terms of your
Yeah.
contract. But also, one of the things I talk about is the gaps in your resume, right? And how that is something that is just made to feel like, well, you're giving up your career if you have a gap. And I say,
Yeah.
listen, we deserve breaks, okay?
Yeah.
Own your break. You take a few weeks, you take a few months off, you can take a year off. If you're able,
Yeah.
if that's where you are. But I promise, at no point is a physician who has a unrestricted medical license in the United States. At no point are you destitute without job options.
Yeah.
So you can take that break, you can step away, you can step back, you can go up, you can go down, as you said, depending on how your personal interests and needs for you and your family change and adjust. We are changing year to year. Why should I be in the same type of job doing the same type of work for my entire career when my needs last year are different from my needs next year? So we took a nice detour, but where we left off in your chronological story was about a year after residency.
Yeah.
You went on and you went per diem and kind of started, I guess, your journey.
Yeah.
Tell me about those first opportunities that you took part in after as you were clinically per diem, but starting other things. What did you do?
Yeah, I'm laughing a little bit because one of my friends describes this period in my career as banging my head against the wall. And at the time, and even for me, it doesn't feel that way. I was like, oh yeah, I was just exploring other things and trying to figure out how to make it work. And she was like, yeah, I watched Kalie just bang her head against the wall and try really hard to like brute force this. And I was like, I guess what I did was kind of brute force it, but there wasn't a beaten path. It's not like I took a fellowship and then I took the natural next step. So like, I did kind of, like bushwhack my way through the non-clinical area, but it's just funny that to hear her describe it like that, because that's not how I experienced it. I was, fully kind of aware of the, experience and education that I was basically forcing on myself. But so I stopped the full-time job. I went, so I did per diem work. And what that meant, I still worked a lot of shifts, but what I could do then was actually do some other stuff. So myself, one of my former residency classmates, who was, again, I think he was in a fellowship at the time when we started this, and we recruited one other CTO. We actually started a company to try to address physician credentialing. We really wanted to give you like the doctor app that you could basically share like an Apple Wallet, basically do Apple Pay and Zoom your credentials out. Obviously that app doesn't exist yet, but someday it will. I think somebody's going to solve this. It just didn't happen to be us. But through that experience, I got in touch with I figured out what the startup ecosystem was at Silicon Valley. I learned about technology. I learned about business. I learned about venture capital and angel investing, and like all of these things had great network kind of development. And then throughout the course of that, I actually taught myself how to code as well, because I wanted to help out our CTO. I know it's like super random. It was like learn how to do sourdough during the pandemic, or like teach myself, Ruby and JavaScript. So I went
fantastic
programming language and kind of learned how to do that so that I could help out some minor stuff with our product development. So had this huge opportunity to just learn and explore. And then throughout the pandemic, I was still working clinically during the pandemic too, but trying to do a lot of this other kind of tech aspects. But during the pandemic, we recognized that our company wasn't going to be as successful as we would have liked. So I decided to take a step back from that company and start exploring other options now that I understood about this entire ecosystem that existed that I had no clue about, being in, fluorescent lighting in the hospital for the last decade plus of my life. So that kind of started the exploration of that ecosystem. I was like, okay, I really like the medicine thing. I really like technology, and I see that there's this huge gap in people that are kind of fluent in both languages and can kind of make sense of it enough to give something that's clinically useful in the world. And so that's where I wanted to kind of take my career. And from there, I did some angel investing, and because I also think there's a big gap there, trying to figure out what companies are legit and what aren't. So I was trying to do a little bit of that while I was exploring other spots, and Carbon Health is where I landed at my first full-time non-clinical gig. And I ended up harassing. So I really enjoyed the mission of that company. They were trying to be the front door to healthcare. They're still the front door to healthcare. They're a nationwide urgent care, primary care, virtual care in clinic. So they have like brick and mortar spots as well as virtual care, and they have grown their own software system. And so they had a bunch of, they had an in-house EMR, and I ended up leading their EMR product as well as integrating all their AI capabilities on that team for them. So super fun. But what happened is I knew about the company. I had contacts that worked there, and then I basically harassed the chief product officer there for like a year until I got him to give me a job. So there was a lot of like, conversations about like, hey, your company's great. I like your mission. I think I can help. And it took a lot of conversations and networking, which before this whole thing, I was very against networking. I was like, oh, it seems sleazy and slimy and weird. And like, now that I'm in it, another thing that I think, how networking is not a dirty word. People are always excited to help. And that was, kind of one of those other breakthrough moments for me where I was like really understood the importance of talking to people, connecting to people, and seeing what they're doing and maybe how that's adjacent to what you want to do or some other things, just exploring those conversations. So that like led me to my first like full-time non-clinical gig, whereas like my startup was full-time, but it was not paying. So it was a different category.
Sure. Oh, when you said the networking part, when I speak to doctors about, we'll start with the basics of finding a job, that is not necessarily an organized process for us. And I find that very few of us are even given any training in that. I think that we're kind of, we're set up to be so competitive with each other and so secretive, and that is set up from pre-med and medical school and residency. Yeah. And so when as you and I talk, and we discuss the collaboration, that collaborative aspect, something I don't know, I know something maybe you don't know, let us come together and we can perhaps solve something together in a way maybe outside of clinical medicine or research or a project or something like that. But exactly as you describe. I also loved the part where you said, you were a little tenacious. You saw something you liked, you saw a company you liked, you saw a mission, you knew that you had a skill set that could be beneficial for that company. So kudos and hats off to you for doing that. I'd say for a lot of people and maybe a lot of listeners thinking, oh my gosh, she was persistent. She maybe got a rejection the first time, but she kept going back. Or maybe not a rejection, but you didn't get the offer that you wanted. But you didn't let that deter you. You continued to go after. You saw something you wanted. You were, brought your A game to the table and showed, the CEO who apparently eventually hired you, showed him how you were useful and resourceful. And again, I know that we as physicians aren't necessarily used to being quote unquote rejected or not given, that thing we want or that thing we've earned. If we don't get it, we kind of, tuck our tail between our legs and we lick our wounds and kind of scurry off and try something else because we're not used to that feeling of not having what we want or what we've worked for. So I just truly commend you for I didn't know that part of your story, but I commend you for being so persistent. So how long were you at Carbon Health and what did you do there?
Oh yeah, I was there for a couple years, but really it's like hats off to my boss. Like Io hired me, and like he didn't know what I was really bringing to the table at the time, and this was part of my like learning about how to like tell people what the skill sets that I have, because that's definitely been a learning process. But I just have to like shout out to him for really taking a chance on me.
What was his name?
That.
Just so he gets the full shout out. What was his name?
His name is Io, and he's the chief product officer, and he's just a really very nice, very smart guy who's like very excited to kind of like have those conversations, even if it's not the right time to kind of hire you at the moment. So he was open to having a conversation with me pretty early on, because I think there was some job that I was like, hey, I think I could do this. And, we had a conversation and it wasn't the right fit or what he needed for that. But he was nice enough to be able to keep the conversation going. And so he and I kind of stayed in contact, and then like another job came up and I was like, hey, what about this one? And he's like, I didn't know that was part of your skill set. I was like, yeah, it depends on what you mean by informatics, but yes, because that's such a buzzword. So that's kind of how it blossomed. But yeah, great guy. And so what I did there, I started on their informatics team. So I always worked on their research and development team for their software product. I started doing informatics for them, and like clinical informatics. So I was, there was a couple other pharmacists on the team, but I was the first like clinician that had joined. And so I kind of helped do some of the intersection between the technology and the true clinical practice, and trying to speak both languages and make sure that like both sides of that equation understood each other. And then when we made a product, so our software was actually like clinically informed, so that once we pushed it out, a lot of like the product was great, and it was made by a bunch of people that knew a lot about medicine but had never like practiced it. So it was like 95% of the way there, but that like 5%, 10% of like lived experience that I could kind of offer to help do a little bit of that product direction, I think ended up making the product a lot better. And so that's why I think you can really tell when you are using a product, when there is somebody that's actually done the job that it's trying to help you do, that was, had a stake in developing it. And I think a lot of us as clinicians have clearly used software that there is no way that a doctor touched that ever. And so that's kind of the thing where I really wanted to be involved in technology and software development. I worked at this in this ER in the Central Valley in California, and there's a few of us that worked there. And we all kind of like have battle wounds from it, as well as like battle stories. But one of the like, it was such a high acuity space. Like you would have head bleeds that were in the waiting room. Like the nurses would order CT scans because the doctors were so backed up. So you would have like, this patient that might have a head bleed that's sitting in your waiting room. You didn't order the CT scan. You haven't seen the patient. You're responsible for them. And then the EMR would never even tell you that it was done, let alone it was abnormal. So it was just like a setup for all kinds of badness. And that like really, that was the reason I took the Kaiser job, because I liked the way that Kaiser had their EMR setup. It was just like, okay, of all the Swiss cheese model of medical error, this has the most cheese and the least holes, and that other shop had like way more holes than cheese in their like medical error model. So that's the background I took to someplace like Carbon Health. And then I went there trying to improve their software product, and I led the provider facing product. So ultimately I started in the clinical informatics role and then grew into leading their EHR product. And then once ChatGPT came out, we were like, there's a big opportunity here. So we were first to market to integrate that ambient scribe technology. So we did that back in June last year. And then in the first couple months, had like 100,000 charts that were created, saved a ton of time. Like now I've poisoned my own well, because I refuse to write my own notes for me, because I'm like, I want to outsource this to the robot. Like it's way better than, not better than I could do solo, but a lot less time. And I am happy to edit instead of draft de novo. So it was, I worked with a really great team. And then we also integrated AI to do some other manual tasks for clinicians. And it was a great team of people.
Wow. I appreciate, thank you for taking me on your whole your journey after, outside of full-time clinical medicine. Yeah. It's so great. For me and the physicians I speak to, so many physicians feel like they need to go to do what you do, or to have a career outside of full-time clinical medicine. They need to go back to school. They need to do another fellowship. They need to go get an MBA or an executive MBA at some, some Ivy League or other, very, very prestigious school. And I feel like I get a lot of flyers for those. And I think that they probably are successful in convincing, that physicians and other, professionals that this is something that they need to take their careers to the next step. But you have very aptly describe that you had an interest. You did your own learning and training, I think, without another degree, without officially going back to school. You trusted yourself. You had an interest. You were persistent in it. And another part, I mean, I so many physicians think that we have to, again, go to school to be able to do a job. And we did. To do the job, to practice clinical medicine, we went to school for a long time. But so much of the rest of the world learns how to do a job by doing the job. And we want all the preparation, we want all the education, we want to be able to know exactly what to do the minute we get there. And so we often are scared and a little intimidated of pursuing work and pursuing industries and jobs where we don't have all of the information. We haven't practiced that procedure 50 or 100 times. We haven't shadowed a number of hours or done another training or fellowship. So I love hearing your story, and that part of your story, I'm hearing more detail than I've ever discussed with you before, but it truly is remarkable, but it's such a great demonstration and a great example of we already have everything we need as physicians. We are so capable. Our biggest strength is our ability to learn new things, and you have so aptly described that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And definitely, I mean, going back to the networking part though, like I didn't do it solo. Part of my research, I was like, should I get an MBA? Because I really liked the business part of the startup world. Like, should I go back to informatics fellowship? And so I reached out to a bunch of docs who had done it. And I definitely considered like the MBA route. And I was like, okay, that's 6 figures. I am still 6 figures in debt. So that's probably a poor choice for me. Like, or it might be a poor choice. Let me explore it a little bit. And I talked to folks and they were like, don't bother. You can learn the same information elsewhere. And similarly with the informatics, like I know a number of informatics fellowships. I still plan on taking that test. I had a baby last year, so I couldn't take it last year, but I hope to take it this year.
Congratulations. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. But I still plan to like do some of that stuff, but all my informatics friends were like, you're already doing informatics. You don't you have the job that people are trying to get to with the thing. They're like, just keep doing your job. And so Perfect. I just kind of, kept doing it. And I will say, like, if you want the brand associated, like the brand can be important with the letters, but if it's the knowledge or the job itself, you don't need, the letters to do that. You don't need the MBA or the fellowship or whatever. Like you can do anything you want to. Depending on where you want to work, that brand might be important. So like that's the one calculus, but I explored those things too. And, if that's the right path for you, by all means, it wasn't the right path for me, but maybe if I was made of money, I would have done an MBA or something, but it's
sometimes
not my situation.
Right. Some things work out. I tell you, they do. Yeah. I'm a big believer at this point, but the way that you've described it is exactly, I like that, you can start. That's the biggest thing. That's what I want listeners, particularly physician listeners, to know. You don't, from the starting line, from behind the gate, you'll look out and think, okay, I need an MBA to even start. I need that extra degree and that training to even start. And we're not disparaging and we're not saying there's no place for those advanced degrees or advanced, official trainings and fellowship. There might be, but so much of it, you actually really can just start. It starts with starting. You don't know what you don't know. You may not know what you already do know and what you're already capable of. And so I always, when I hear doctors say, oh, well, I'm doing this, but I need to get this MBA before I can even start another venture. Please, that is not true. Just start. See what you know, see what you don't know. As Dr. Dove-Maguire said, maybe at some point, another degree or a fellowship, or you're going to take the informatics test, but you just don't need it to start. So start, and if you see a real dearth and a real blind spot in your education that degree or training could fill, maybe, but please just start, whatever it is, just start doing it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the best product managers I worked with was this woman named Mara Olson. She's a phenomenal product manager. If anybody has the opportunity to recruit her, they totally should. But she went to UCSF med school, decided that wasn't right for her, went into tech, and she's like, nobody tell this amazing secret that, all the skills you learn in medical school are very applicable to product development. And because she She's great. She can take a history, that's kind of an assessment of like what's working or what needs to happen, and then you can solve a solution for it. So it's a very much a skill set that many physicians or medical students or whatever have like developed, that framework of problem solving that you just get to apply into technology and different like product stuff. So it's a natural segue, and the words and the language you have to learn, but the skill set is there for a lot of clinicians.
You nailed it, and you keep saying, taking the words out of my mind and saying them. So thank you so much.
The mind meld. Yeah, we've got
it really is. It really is. Okay, as we wrap up, what would you tell a physician who is in full-time clinical medicine, curious about working in different ways, curious about a world and a life and a career outside of full-time clinical medicine? Maybe they're interested in tech, maybe they aren't, but what would you say to such a physician?
Start exploring. So just look at the stuff, like if you're interested in anything. So there's local things, and then there's like, more abstract education. Like the local things you can do is like anything that you like at your local hospital, like chase that down, because it's probably going to be clinically adjacent. So if you like informatics, like figure out who is like on your order set committee or whatever, and figure out kind of how that works. If it's something that's a little bit more, you want to expand your knowledge, you're like, I want to learn about this machine learning thing. Like there is so much free education these days. Like it's amazing. And plus you could just go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, let's talk about machine learning, and like have a one-on-one conversation. So like explore the things you're interested in. But if you want to like make traction in your career, like I would say like start locally, get the vocabulary so you can have the conversations with people, and then, start networking and talking to people that look like they have an interesting career. Cause that's, I don't know. I think getting exposure to it, so you can also, you might get exposure and be like, oh, I don't want that. Like pay cut. Exactly. No, thank you. It's like totally fine to have those sort of things, but maybe you'll see something that's you're interested in, and then you can continue. Like, I, at my last company, learned about all of the AI integration stuff. I work at my current company right now as a AI company, and it's a different type of AI, but I, was able to expand my knowledge and exposure to the entire, ecosystem and the healthcare plus AI intersection. And now I'm at this super exciting company that's like going to have this massive impact. And, I would have never explored that had I not, gotten just like kind of followed those like threads where they lead, and just, expand your knowledge along the way.
Oh, Fed, exactly that. I always say, like, your career sounds like it is maybe different than you imagined. When you left Kaiser, when you were, that 1 year out of clinical medicine, you thought, okay, this is not it, but I'm going to just start taking steps in the direction of a life I think I want to live, out of curiosity, out of survival. But you couldn't, I see physicians waiting for that perfect career, that perfect tailor-made, custom-made career to just fall into their lap and effectively rescue them from a clinical job they're not happy or satisfied with. Mm-hmm. And I try to tell them, and I tell so many physicians, it doesn't really work that way. If this is a career that you've made, you have to take the steps, and houses are generally built piece by piece. You can't, it's not just going to fall into your lap. Yours has taken some twists and some turns and some, I like this, I don't like that. I made this connection, I networked here. And it has eventually led to where you are, which sounds like it's a perfect match or fit for now, for you, for what you love. But you made that, you made and followed yourself and trusted yourself along the way, and have arrived, it sounds like, at a place that is very fruitful and fulfilling, and you're making such important and big change in the world.
Yeah, I'm definitely enjoying it. Although I would not, like that you alluded to, it was not intentional. It was like every time I keep being like, this is going to dry up. This isn't going to work. I'm going to go back to the ER. Like every step of the way, there was like a huge amount of imposter syndrome at first. And then like, as I got more familiar, I'm like, oh, there is like a need for people that speak both languages, and potentially 3 languages. You have like the clinical understanding, you have the operational understanding, you have the software understanding, and then you have the AI understanding. Like the people that have domains in all, like at least a fluency, it might be rudimentary in my case with some of those, but like the ability to kind of marry those, I'm like, oh shoot, there is like, it's not a big area to like fill, but there are some jobs there that like need that person. And that's the thing that I was not convinced about. And even now I'm like, I keep thinking like, oh, this is gonna, when is this train gonna run out? But so far I think it's the field is expanding, not contracting. So I'm happy to like continue exploring it.
I think you are very safe in this field and at that intersection. Okay, quickly as we wrap, I'm curious just where do you see the future of AI, ChatGPT, medicine? If you can be as long or as short with your prediction as possible, but I'm very curious, and I'm sure physician listeners are too. You know, they want to know what's coming down the pike, and maybe we can be a part of creating it and making it safe for patients and safe for physicians.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So this is an entire podcast in and of itself, but yeah, this is the exciting part and where I would like encourage everybody to become involved, because like things are going to change and we can be part of it or we can watch it happen. And but either way, this technology is there, and I cannot wait for the robots to take over a lot of my tasks. But there are some things where I think, you know, there's been a likening to like autonomous driving. We can like think about autonomous doctoring the same way. You know, level 5 is like the full, you know, lost in space, you know, sci-fi little scan bed that you get laid in and then everything magically happens. Like, we're a long ways away from that. But as terms of like, you know, automatic braking, automatic cruise control, like some autonomous driving in certain situations, like I think the technology already exists to be able to take care of a lot of those things where a resident can also take care of, you know, when I was like, you know, senior resident thinking I'm hot shit, being able to, you know, take care of a single, you know, pathology like bad CHF. Like, that's the kind of thing where we have a lot of data to suggest the correct outcomes. And so we can have a little AI copilot that tells us, you know, hey, you should remember to, you know, do some afterload reduction. And then what did you think about this? And like, here's some pressors that we can do if their pressure goes down. Like, that's the kind of thing we can do. But once you throw in like, oh, they also have, you know, CKD, they haven't had dialysis in a week, and they have CHF, and they have some COPD, and hey, they also have COVID right now. That's a data-free zone. We're not going to have the robots take over yet, but we are going to be able to kind of get a lot of like AI support as we move towards that like autonomous driving sort of situation. So I think right now we're in like autonomous driving potential of like 3, right? It's going to be able to take care of the sore throats, the earaches, the, you know, single pathology things, and with a lot of, you know, clinical oversight. But I think in the future, we're going to be able to get to a point where it can do, you know, a lot, and we can double check it for the, you know, more human components of, and that spidey sense. You know, there are that like, you know, you see somebody and they're like, they look sick, but on paper they seem fine. But when you look at them, they look sick. So those are the things we're still going to be able to have a big role in. But, you know, towards the future, I think we're going to move more and more towards that level 3 and level 4, where we have, you know, the robots doing some of it and the clinicians supervising. And then for, you know, to bring it back down to reality, like the next couple years and what's going on right now, we'll have a lot more ambient scribe technology. I think the dearth of ways to sift through the amount of information. We get more and more information, but we can't process all of it. So being able to automate some of that processing of the information, and that's a lot of what my current company does, is trying to automate like all of the data aggregation from a patient's medical chart and then presenting it in a very, you know, concise manner. That's like 40% of what a doc spends their time on, is trying to figure out what's going on with the patient and how do I, you know, work within that to treat it. And then another 30% is that documentation. So I think we're going to have more of these technology solutions to take off some of that cognitive overload for us, so that we don't have to write our own notes. We don't have to do the prior auths. We don't have to do some of those like, you know, school notes and work notes, like all those kind of like rote things, plus like the chart aggregation. That's going to be taken off of our plate first. And then once we move into decision making and trying to treat patients, that'll be another phase change where the tech is there, but the adoption is going to lag a little bit. But I'm excited for the future. I can't wait to embrace these things.
Oh, I can't wait to see what you do in this field. I am just so glad, and I know that there are residents and younger attendings coming up behind, and who will join you in your mission. But yes, your energy and excitement about it is infectious. So thank you for joining me today. I have a closing question that I ask each guest, and so I'd like to ask, for where you are and what you do now in your career, did the present version of this career just happen on its own? Did it fall into your lap, or did you have to take some action in order to make it happen?
Oh my gosh. It was, I think, a combination of all three. I think there was definitely a component of luck. And then, like my friend characterized before, it was like a lot of brute forcing. So I think I brute forced my way here. There was a lot of action on that. But I think there were some people that took a really great chance on me, and kind of helped me along the way. So I think, it was a very much a partnership, but it wasn't, it wasn't intentional necessarily. Like I didn't know that I was going to land here. And,
Right.
so it was a little serendipity, a little brute force, and a little bit of luck.
Thank you, Kalie. Thank you, Dr. Dove-Maguire. Thank you for joining me today. I am so excited for the future of informatics, of the intersection of AI and healthcare. But I'm most excited to watch physicians find an interest, pick it up, pursue it, and potentially change kind of the course of medicine as you do it. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for spreading such a good message about being able to explore other things and just giving people permission and exposure to it. So, thank you for everything you do, because I think it's so needed right now in so many different domains. So it's always a pleasure talking to you, and it was, such an honor to be on here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.